Welcome back, everybody, to the Five Sports Show, your May 1st edition. Cam Murray is off today, so we have our new special guest, Patrick Renaud, joining the show. Patrick, thanks for coming on and talking ball with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.
Yeah, of course. So let's jump right into it because I feel like the big story this week, of course, has been, or the last couple weeks for that matter, has been the transfer portal and what West Virginia basketball, both in men's and women's, has done on that side. No new news for all of you today and in terms of commitments or transfers for WVU as of Friday afternoon. So nothing new there. We do have some reports of maybe some potential visits this weekend, maybe on Saturday. Ross Hodge bringing in some high school kids that might get an opportunity. Maybe that'll work out. We'll have to keep you updated on that, of course. But let's just talk about the men's team additions so far, give an overview of, because, of course, this is your first time on the show, Patrick, so I haven't got to hear your thoughts about the team,
Yeah.
Overall, what they've done so far. So, of course, they added Finley Bizjack, 17-point per game scorer at Butler. They added Mo Sela from Georgia Tech, a big man. I think he's 6'10", coming into West Virginia. So just give me first your overall thoughts on what you've seen from this transfer portal class so far.
So I really like what they've done so far. I think coming from last season into this season, one of the biggest needs that needed to be addressed was the center position, the big man position.
Yeah.
And so bringing in both Mo Sela and then as well as going into the high school realm and getting Amadou Saini. Hope I'm pronouncing his name right.
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah. Bringing both of them in, I think, is going to be a huge revamp for that center room. Finley Bizjack, I think he is going to be a great addition to this team to kind of come in, play alongside Miles Sadler, who's going to come in. And then Javon Buchanan, hopefully the waiver process for him is very smooth and he's able to come in and just come in as that sixth man. But other than that, yeah, I like what they've done so far.
And, right now, in terms of the two main recruiting websites, On3 has them at number 20 in the nation. 247 Sports has them number 26 in the nation. So, really a good-looking class for West Virginia. You want to be in that realm, the top 25. Of course, you're a team that should be contending for March Madness, should be making the NCAA tournament. We talked about earlier this week with Cam about the expansion for the NCAA tournament. What's your thoughts on that real quick?
Yeah, personally myself, I don't want the tournament to expand.
I held the same opinion.
I
have the same opinion.
It's because they're going to make the 16 seeds have to play their way in, and I feel like they already do that in the conference tournament.
Right.
That's just my opinion. Hopefully with 76 teams, it makes it easier for the Mountaineers to get in there and try and make some noise in March. I know last year they still wouldn't have done it, but maybe now they might be able to. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, with this transfer portal class being top 25 in the nation, at least 26, we'll just call it top 25. But being one of the best recruiting classes in the nation, obviously never going to be perfect. What do you think is something that WVU needs to add? Because earlier this week I mentioned maybe like a wing player or someone that can score from the wing, maybe has some athleticism, somebody that can rebound on that position. So what would you say? What would you pinpoint as like something that West Virginia really needs to hone in on the transfer portal to finish out the cycle?
I really do think they need to go for that wing position. Kind of that position that Lorient would play in, or even from then going into that four position, that stretch position where you're going to have Sela or Saini down low, you're going to have Sadler and Bizjack at 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4 right now are kind of just up in the air. So I think going and addressing the wing and then addressing that 4 position, someone that might be able to help you stretch the floor is going to be huge for them.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you that on that. So I want to shift gears here for a second. Let's talk about the women's team. Of course, they don't get the notoriety as the men's team does, but they perform better than the men's team, in my opinion. Of course, the Crown Championship was a big deal for the men's team last season. Don't want to discredit that. But the women's team made it to March Madness, got to host March Madness for that matter, beat Miami, Ohio, lost to Kentucky in that thriller in the second round. But I want to talk about the additions they've made this year. They lost 8 players, I believe, from last year's roster. They lost 10 players from last year's roster and have got 8 transfers. That's the difference. So 8 transfers headlined by Alexis Bordas from Wheeling, West Virginia. Great to have an in-state native joining the team. And, of course, I got Skylar Forbes from Marquette. She added 15 points a game there. Bordas was a freshman as well. I wanted to mention that. She scored 15 points a game at Duquesne. So 2 high-scoring, prolific players. Just give me your thoughts there on the class as well, because that's a team that you expect to reload. Mark Kellogg, you're expecting him to continue to play his style of basketball. So what are you seeing there?
Yeah, so I think what Mark Kellogg is doing with the women's team is just phenomenal. The way he came in after they had Dawn Plitzwhite for 1 year, and then Kellogg came in from Stephen F. Austin and just revamped the program entirely, made them kind of just almost like a powerhouse somewhat in the Big 12. Now they've got that
Absolutely.
Big 12 tournament they hosted, and he's just reloading, and I think they're going to be just as good again next year.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I mean, they lose Jordan Harrison, as you see on your screen. She was an excellent player for this team. She's playing in the WNBA preseason right now. We haven't talked any about that because, of course, it is preseason, but we do want to highlight. She scored. I saw she scored a nice layup the other night
Yeah.
in her Portland Fire debut, a new expansion team for the WNBA. So Jordan Harrison getting some minutes at the next level. But anyways, they're going to miss her presence for sure. But it looks like in terms of this roster that they're bringing in, they're really doing what they can to reload. I think I have no reason to not have expectations that this team should be back in March Madness. That's basically the bar. Would you agree with that now for the women's team?
I would say, yeah, the bar is just making March Madness every year. You want to exceed that bar a little bit and get a hosting spot. That's great. But definitely the bar right now is making the tournament.
Yeah, so we talked about Alexis Bordas, one of those transfers that WVU brought in, averaged 15 points a game at Duquesne. And Cam and I, earlier this week, talked to her, got an exclusive interview with her. So we're going to go ahead and play that here in a second. But make sure you stay tuned after that interview because Patrick and I are going to talk everything WVU baseball. They have a big series this weekend, so we want to make sure we highlight that. But first, let's hear from Alexis Bordas on her transfer to WVU.
Obviously, now you're joining West Virginia. What were these last couple weeks like, and what was the process ultimately choosing West Virginia and the recruitment, and I guess from their side, how they approached you and what that all was like?
Yeah, it was super chaotic, super stressful. I had been told that's what it would be like, but you don't really realize it until you're in the thick of it. Within seconds of entering the portal, I had several texts, so it was super overwhelming. I was in class and I was like, what's going on? So yeah, I had 70 schools reach out to me. So it was really difficult to manage that the first few days of everyone reaching out, but just slowly narrowing my list every single day, and then deciding where I wanted to take visits and where I was really serious about. Coach Kellogg had called me on the first day I was in the portal, so that meant a lot to me. And then just continued the recruitment every few days, would reach out and say something to me or my parents. But ultimately, I mean, I had so many great options, but West Virginia was always it stood out. When you look back at it, it checks every box. They are the reigning Big 12 champs. Obviously, history of winning. Coach Kellogg has won at every level he's been at. The culture has always been so great, and the players that they're bringing in from the portal are super talented. I played against several of them, and the players they have returning are also super talented. So that was a huge factor. And then just the support that I've had from everyone already, from all the West Virginia fans, has meant so much, and it shows you how much the state rallies around their programs, especially the women's basketball program.
You got anything to that?
Yeah, so being from Wheeling, talk about that connection and how it made it, a good choice to come to West Virginia. Talk about that connection.
Yeah, it's definitely extra special to be close to home and to have your family come to all your games. I was lucky that this year I was also close to home, so I always had a huge fan section with all my cousins and aunts and uncles, grandparents, siblings. So I'm super lucky that I'm going to have that opportunity again for the next 3 years to stay close to home. And being from West Virginia, it means a lot. I understand how great this state is and how all the people that support you, and I hope that I can be a role model for younger girls looking up to me and being like, I could be on the team one day playing for my home state.
So you go from Wheeling Park High School, obviously, and a great career there. And then you go to Duquesne. What were some of the biggest challenges you overcame, and some differences between you're playing high school ball and you're playing at the college level? And what was some of those challenges you overcame in that first year?
Baker, if you had an unlimited budget.
Yeah, I would say that physically, it's a lot on your body, and I had to learn to take breaks. My work ethic is something I really pride myself in, and I work super hard. I'm always in the gym, and I had several just lingering like overuse injuries, and my coaches and my parents were like, you need to back it up a little bit and take some time off. So just being smart about my body and my recovery was definitely a big thing for me. I was lucky that I was able to play in all of the games, so I didn't have anything that kept me out. But that was an adjustment. And then the way I was guarded, I was really heavily guarded. I was face guarded almost every game, and I didn't really expect that coming in. So to kind of adapt to that and figure out ways to get myself open, coming off of screens and creating my own shot.
So you mentioned a lot of reasons why you picked WVU. Did Mark Kellogg's system kind of play into that, like the fast pace, hard defense? How did that play into your decision?
Yeah, definitely. That was a huge factor, is style of play and fit. I wanted to go somewhere that I was going to fit in and be in a system that suits me and my game.
So we showed up and we did
But
his
yeah, I
thing.
mean, he's really known for his defensive pressure turning into his offense. But I think the offensive side is pretty underrated for WVU because they are a great offensive team too. So just going to a team and a program that is very good on both sides of the ball is super important.
So from this season, obviously you're playing an opponent. Well, you played an opponent this season that you'll be seeing a lot when you play at West Virginia, and that's Pitt. And that was one of your best games, 38 points, 10 threes. Can you talk about that game and what that meant to you and just to have that great performance and what you can bring to West Virginia to hopefully repeat that performance a couple seasons from now, or next season, I should say?
Yeah, Pitt's always been, I grew up a West Virginia fan, so Pitt's always been like the team that we root against. So it was really cool to play them, and Duquesne being in Pittsburgh, that's a rivalry for Duquesne as well. So I had kind of like a double rivalry for me. And I was super excited. I had gone to the city game the last several years when Duquesne played Pitt, and it was always a great game. And Duquesne had won the last like 3 or 4 games, so I was super excited to be in that game, and the atmosphere was incredible. And it was super fun, obviously having a great game and all my teammates how like excited they got for me. It was super fun.
So jumping up to the Big 12 this season, talk about, of course, the shooting for you is going to translate, but talk about, what parts of your game you think will translate the best moving up to the Big 12.
Yeah, I think definitely the shooting is something that translates anywhere. If you can shoot, you can shoot. Being able to stretch the floor for my other teammates and create driving lanes for them. I think just my scoring overall is something that if you can score, you can kind of score at any level. And I think just like my motor, my intensity, how hard I play, that'll always translate as well.
Now, in terms of obviously playing in the Big 12, there are some differences between playing in the conference you played in this year. Are there any things you're looking at, maybe trying to improve upon before the season begins? Any things you're looking at your game or anything personally that you're like, I got to improve upon this before I step on the court and, play the teams in the Big 12?
Yeah, I'm definitely working on my finishing the most right now. Especially, the Big 12 is going to be bigger, stronger posts and guards. So getting into the lane, I know it's going to be more difficult to finish. So really working on that, working on my change of pace. Like I said, going to be quicker guards. So being able to change my pace to freeze them and go by them. Those would be the 2 main things that I would say I think are going to be adjustments that I am going to continue to work on.
You have anything on?
And then just one more question, talking about your high school career. Me and Zach cover high school sports in West Virginia. We cover all the high school basketball and stuff. Just curious, what is one team or one player that gave you the most trouble when you played in high school? Obviously, you had a lot of success, but what was some player or a team that gave you the most trouble? And when you played them, you knew you had to be on your best.
This is kind of ironic, but Morgantown and Kaylee Kellogg for sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we played Morgantown like 5 times a year. It was crazy because they're in our section, in our conference, in our region. Like, it was insane. And then we ended up playing them in the tournament every year too. So, huge rivalry. It was always a battle. We went into triple overtime my freshman year with them. Like, it's always been super fun to play Morgantown. And then obviously Kaylee's a great player, and she's just got cleared actually, so I'm super excited for her to get back on the court. But she's a great player. She always gives us trouble.
Alexis, she seems like a great player, somebody that's going to really benefit from being here back at home at West Virginia. Of course, big get for Mark Kellogg in that group, and just one of many transfers they've gotten this year. So, as always, stay tuned here for any transfer news. We'll keep you updated on that. But we are going to shift gears now to some West Virginia baseball because they play Kansas State at home this weekend for a 3-game series. Every Big 12 series is important as you end the season here. I believe they have 2 more home series. This one and the one against TCU. 3 more series left in the regular season in total. And Patrick, they struggled last week.
Yeah.
Cam and I have talked about it. Simply put, they struggled, gave up 40 runs just last week in 4 games. Mm-hmm. Obviously, 23 of those was against Pitt.
Yeah.
But so they moved down from number 12 in the rankings to number 18 in the rankings this week as they host Kansas State. So how much they struggled last week. They lost 3 out of those 4 games last week. I'm gonna ask you your opinion on that, but I also want to highlight a comment of the day. As always, we look at the YouTube comments on all of these videos, so make sure you leave a comment, leave a like as well. But make sure you always leave comments because we'll be looking at them. But the one we got on our video from Wednesday, Mountaineer Max is his username. Shout out to Mountaineer Max. He said, "Tired arms other than the starters. Timely hitting has disappeared." So basically, he was giving a reasoning for as the baseball team has struggled. He says everybody but the starters in terms of arms are tired, and they aren't hitting in clutch situations. And from the games I've watched, that seems like that's the case. They haven't, when it came down to the ninth inning, they're not really being clutch right now. And I know that's just that might sound like coach talk or something, coach speak, but it's a real thing that can happen. It's momentum, how it works in sports, if you believe in that. So, Patrick, I want to get your thoughts on that because, he says there's tired arms outside of the starters. Of course, one of our starters, Dawson Montesa, has struggled, but the other starters have been pretty good. So I want to hear your opinion on that. What is the reason you think that West Virginia baseball struggled last week, and what led to it, you think?
Yeah, so I think the pitcher thing, that's always, ever since Alec Manoah, that's kind of been the thing with WVU baseball, has been the pitchers are always up in the air on that. That's always going to be a question. You look back to the North Carolina game. I think it was the North Carolina game where Derek Clark threw 130 pitches.
Well over 125 pitches, I think, in that game.
And it was just because it's the arm you trust. And I think that's kind of a factor with WVU baseball and their arms. As for last week and why they struggled, I think they knew going into that Pitt game it was going to be a game where you were going to have to compete for runs.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's always the story in baseball, but this one it was going to be that. And then there was the whole issue with the starter. Then he didn't start. But then he came in the third inning
because they were trying to figure out Max Yell as well.
Yeah. And they couldn't hit against Pitt. They got some unlucky breaks, but they just couldn't hit, and Pitt couldn't strike out for any matter at all.
And Pitt also hit it felt like 20 home runs in that game. I'm exaggerating, but it felt like that given the run total. But, another point I want to make that is there's some good news for West Virginia baseball because Max Yell is back in the rotation this weekend. He's actually starting Friday night tonight at 6:30 p.m. for the Mountaineers, so that's a good sign. They moved around the rotation a little bit this weekend as well. It'll be Chance and Cole on Saturday and then Dawson Montesa on Sunday. So they're moving Montesa from the Friday to the Sunday starter. What's your opinion on that? Of course, it's always good news to get Max Yell back in the lineup because he's probably been the best pitcher on the staff this year. So what's your thoughts on the rotation change?
So I think Max Yell being the Friday starter is how it always was going to be. Then he got hurt. Now he's back.
Right.
He's always going to be slotted into that Friday spot. I think moving Montesa to Sunday, I think they are taking that Friday starting experience and putting him to Sunday just in case Sunday is either win the series game or you're already up 2-0, and that's a game where you still want to win it no matter what. And he's got the Friday night experience of trying that very important game, getting in there, getting that pitching done.
Yeah, and you think about the relievers that WVU has relied on this season, guys like Reese Bassinger, and I think of I have his name written down here. Carson Estridge, of course. Those are two guys that are coming out of the pen that WVU has relied on quite a bit, and both of them played in multiple games last weekend against Cincinnati. Maybe that plays into the tired arms because you're playing tired arms that you rely on versus fresh arms that you may not have as much trust in. So it's kind of a give and take there for West Virginia baseball right now, trying to find the guys that they can rely on. Of course, pitching in college baseball is kind of, I hate to use this word, but kind of a crapshoot sometimes.
Yes,
you know what I mean? You're trying to find the guys that you can trust and guys that you can rely on. So that's been a struggle for West Virginia, of course, and that showed in the Pitt game too. So let's talk about Kansas State here to finish out our little bit of preview for the series this weekend. Kansas State, they're 26-19 in the Big 12 standings. It goes Kansas number 1, and then Arizona State is second. Of course, West Virginia won the series against Arizona State, lost the series against UCF, which is in third, and then, of course, you have West Virginia in fourth and TCU in fifth. So that's kind of what the Big 12 standings look like. So Kansas State may be below West Virginia in the Big 12 standings, but every series at this point, if you want to, make it to host in regional, something like that, of course, that's the aspirations. If you want to do that, every series is going to be important. Talk about this Kansas State series because, a team that's 26-19 is obviously not a slouch, but they have given up 7 runs in their last game. They've lost 4 in a row. So maybe you find a team that's slumping at the right time. You can take advantage, maybe get a sweep, put yourself ahead. So what's your thoughts on this series against Kansas State and how important it is?
Yeah, obviously every series is a must-win series in the Big 12.
Yeah,
There's no question about that. But this one just feels very different in the sense of it feels like it could make or break the season.
I agree with that.
You really want to get out of this series. Ideally, you want to sweep this team who have been struggling, and you just want to go in there, get your 3 wins, and get out and move on to the next. 2-1 series win, that's great. But this is a series you cannot afford to lose because I feel like it'll set the tone for the rest of the season.
And they have a big series next weekend as well in Lawrence. Of course, I just mentioned Kansas is atop the Big 12 standings, so a huge series in Lawrence. If you can somehow get 2 out of 3 against Kansas, that'll definitely propel you into an opportunity to host, because Kansas actually right now is it projected to host. And I wanted to talk about some of those projections for our last topic here, Patrick, because two projections here. D1 Baseball has WVU in the Gainesville Regional, with number 1 Florida hosting, of course, in Gainesville, number 2 West Virginia, number 3 NC State, and then the 4 seed Bethune-Cookman in that regional. And then Baseball America has them in the Starkville Regional, with Mississippi State hosting, of course, Florida and Mississippi State. Those are just powerhouses in college baseball. You would expect that.
Yeah, any regional that you're facing an SEC team is just not going to be fun at all.
Like WVU faced Kentucky and LSU in the last few regionals. Kentucky, right? I think, or that might have been a few years ago.
Kentucky, they faced Kentucky last year in the Clemson Regional.
That's what it was.
And then they were in the Kentucky Regional a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And then last year was LSU in the Super Regional.
Right. And then they, of course, played North Carolina as well. And so, just powerhouses in terms of college baseball programs. But West Virginia slotted as a 2 seed, technically not hosting right now, on the cusp of hosting, of course, still a 2 seed. So, what do you think they need to do to, get above that cusp and have an opportunity to host?
Yeah, so I really think, obviously, this Kansas State series is going to be huge. I think you probably can afford to drop that Kansas series just because of where they're at in the standings. I think that's the only series left that you can afford to drop, because it's an on-the-road series against the top team in your conference. But then you can make up for that, and you can go make noise in the Big 12 tournament, something that we've seen this team struggle to do for the last 3 years. Each year that they've made the regionals and then the super regional, they have just struggled completely in that Big 12 tournament. And I think if you really want to host this year, you're going to make noise in there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be an important series. Like you said, every Big 12 series is important. Another important one this weekend, I wanted to say, game times, Friday at 6:30, that's happening tonight, Saturday at 4 p.m., Sunday at 1 p.m. All those games will be on ESPN Plus if you'd like to watch. And, of course, follow our social media pages. We'll have full coverage of that as well. But, Patrick, any final thoughts about the baseball team before we head out here? Because this is the last thing we were talking about today.
No, I think those were all my thoughts about the baseball team today.
All right, sounds good. Well, that's all for our 5 Sports show today. Thank you, Patrick, so much for joining us again, filling in for Cam Murray, who's off today. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. But make sure, as always, tune in on air. We have sports every night, 6 and 11 p.m. Make sure you tune in for that. And also, leave a comment on this video. Let us know your thoughts on the baseball team, your thoughts on the basketball transfer portal roster so far. Let us know what you think. And, of course, leave a like. And thanks for watching.